Okay, now we're going to do what some feel are the dreaded swords. This is the suit represented by, there you go, a sword. And it represents the element of air. So far we've done fire with the wands, water with the cups, and now air with the swords. The swords represent more about pure mind, thinking, speaking, and the intellect. They represent problems and troubles, especially relating to communications or someone spreading bad news about someone else or saying words that might intentionally hurt someone. They can have to do with acts of hostility, but for the most part, they have to do with mentality, with some struggle mixed in, even combat, and rationalizing, thinking things through. So with the swords, we have the ace, which is a new beginning. Aces are always a new beginning. The hand is holding the sword upright. And so this is saying that the mind is awakening for new challenges. This usually indicates that the person's mind is feeling sharper and clearer than before. They may wish to talk, want to discuss, or even write. I really feel like the Ace of Swords is another card indicating a writer. Just like the Six of Wands indicates someone who has already written something or is in the process of writing something. So the sword is lifted, and basically the client wants to test its edge, and it really is a time for thinking things through and handling situations with a clear and a sharp mind. That's the Ace of Swords. We come to the Two of Swords, and you see a woman sitting on a bench with swords crossed. She's blindfolded. And so this card suggests a clash of ideas or even words. There could be an inner conflict going on, a mental conflict. The blindfolded lady indicating impartiality. She is sitting there not in judgment but waiting for the judgment to pass. And so it's the knowledge of how to balance these conflicting ideas and come into some sort of a compromise which works for all. It's about coming into peace after a lot of mental aggravation, if you will. Now, this is only a temporary compromise. It doesn't mean the long-term solution, but it also indicates it's a fleeting conflict. It won't last for long. The direction of the new brain power here is to keep two ideas from fighting, to hold off trouble and make peace. So that is the Two of Swords. And we have the dreaded Three of Swords. No one likes to see this in a reading, and this card, just by looking at it, elicits some fear and some trepidation. So the three is basically the background of a storm. There could be a separation going on between two people. It could be two friends have had a terrible argument, or family members have had an argument. There are a lot of sharp words maybe having been thrown around that create pain and heartbreak. This card could represent love triangles. But whatever the querent believes to be true, they have to really take a look at the evidence and find out if what is being presented to them is truly real and not an illusion. Now, it also is a card, when in a past position, could actually represent a divorce. I also see this card as maybe an upcoming surgery, but the surgery is minor. Maybe it's something for a tooth. I don't see it as a major surgery card like I do the Nine of Swords, and we'll be coming on that card later on. You know, nobody welcomes surgery, but to me, this is not a life-threatening situation. It also can represent someone being presented with open heart surgery as an alternative to heart problems. Coming to the fours are foundation. The Four of Swords, you can see a young person resting on a pallet of sorts. It could even look like some sort of a crypt situation. This man maybe looks like she is dead, but they really are taking a break. They're just stepping back. They're letting their mind relax. This is a meditation card. It's a card saying it's time to really quiet the mind and think things through and not even look for an outcome, but just to take time out. Could be recuperation from something or a situation that has been very, very tumultuous. And so when this card comes up in a reading, it just means that it's time for someone to lay down their swords, so to speak, let go of their worries, and do some positive reflection. To me, it also represents there could be regret for previous actions taken. Coming to the Five of Swords, we've got someone holding a sword in each hand. Others are facing away. The Five of Swords, to some people, represent a solution to a problem that has been presented. In arguments and battles of ideas, there's going to be times when one just needs to let go and surrender. If one feels like they have lost in some sort of a battle, whether it be a battle at work, whether it be at home, the best thing to do is just to let go and walk away. This is a good time to walk away. It is a win-lose situation if the conflict continues. In other words, one is going to lose, one is going to win. So to make it a win-win situation, walking away is basically the best thing to do. Even if one feels like they need to continue an argument, they need to be prepared to learn from what's going on and not allow feelings of failure, anger, or blame to overcome them. The Six of Swords for a lot of people is a travel card. You can see a young man pulling people across a river. They've got swords in front of them. The classic meaning is that one is leaving difficulties behind. A trip or a change of scenery may be the answer to restoring balance. But there's more to it than this. In relation to the mind, ideas, and words of the sword suit, this is also about finding a solution to either math problems, brain twisters, not just troubles, but to really, really analyze a situation or even a document and really see what it says. Now, the ferryman here could signal some sort of a silent partner or a helper or even a spirit guide who is helping in the situation, who is offering backup and is there for the querent as they're making their journey across the river. Okay, so anyway, this card says that there are answers to problems. Any arguments or ideas are going to be working out smoothly, perfectly, beautifully. And of course, this card could represent a trip by boat. Okay, we get to the sevens, and here we see what is considered a thief sneaking off with 5 out of the 7 swords. This is the thief card. That someone is stealing from you, not necessarily tangible items, but possibly your honor, your ideas, and your time. You know, we've spoken about energy vampires, people who actually steal energy from others. Now, I'm not a fortune teller, but it could represent there's some bad gossip floating around in the background, and for one to just be on the alert, to be aware of what is going on around them. Now, if someone does find out they're being maligned in some way or character assassination, then this is a card that indicates there's the tendency to want to rush in and be confrontational, but this is not going to work at this particular time. It's an out of control situation which will allow the thief, quote unquote, to play the innocent. So to catch a thief, you must be ever aware. So this card is about awareness around the querent, trying to ascertain what's real without being paranoid. The Eight of Swords card, Eight of Swords, is a very interesting card. Some people call it the in jail card. Some people think that the Two of Swords is the in jail card, but I see this as when it comes up and I get a feeling like someone around the querent is actually incarcerated, you know, I might mention that, and if they haven't mentioned it to me already. This card is the darned if you do, darned if you don't card, you know, the catch-22. The querent is in a situation where they're afraid to move. They're afraid to do anything. If they move, they'll get cut. However, if you notice, the ropes that bind them are not very, very strong. So all they need to do is wiggle a little bit and make some small step into a positive direction, or do something to alleviate the situation. The longer they stay in the situation, the longer they'll just entrap themselves. It's kind of like if you've got a tooth problem and you just ignore it, you're in denial, but that problem, that infection, will just not go away. And so there needs to be a step taken to cut the ribbons, so to speak. So the querent must have the strength to take these steps, to endure the cuts, or else they're going to stay trapped. They must move, for the longer they let the situation continue, the worse it will get. Okay, the very dark looking Nine of Swords. To me, this is the card of great worries, great distress, possible nightmares, possibly a long ongoing illness. It's, to me, a card of, you know, when one feels that they're in the situation and they toss and turn and they can't sleep at night, to let themselves know that they're being watched over and the solution is on the way. So I don't necessarily see this, even though it looks very dark, as a real bad card, because, you know, in our dreams and our nightmares, our worst fears come into fruition, but in conscious daylight, it may not be as bad as it appears. So when this card comes up, you know, I tend to feel like someone is really having trouble sleeping. Could be insomnia, could be bad dreams, and when they realize that a bad dream is just that, a bad dream, and not necessarily a bad portent of something distressing to come, then it may just all be in their head, and they need to relax and let, once again, the solution come. We have here one of the most dire looking cards in the tarot deck, and when the Ten of Swords comes up, no one likes to see this in a reading. The card tells me that someone has been totally maligned, or they've just been totally stripped of everything, their dignity, what's important to them. Family members may have turned against them. They feel like there is no way out of this dark pit, and they just give up. You know, they've just given up, And so they're down on the ground and feeling like the whole world has been destroyed around them. Now, to me, this card represents that the worst is over. You'll notice when you look at your own card, there's yellow as in a sunrise, so a new day is dawning. You notice that he has his hand up, palm up right there, indicating that all is not lost and there is still something that can be done, that there is still a way out, and that there are alternatives, that no one is ever totally backed against the wall and has no solution in sight whatsoever. So when this card comes up in a reading, let someone know, hey, this is telling you that the worst is over and that actually you're on your way up. Now, also, this to me, this card represents a very severe surgery, maybe in the past or in the future, dependent upon where it shows up in the reading. But how do you know if that's what it means? Just like I mentioned over and over again, it's the feeling you get from the card and the other cards around it. Okay, so that's the 10. So we're going into the court cards now. And remember, the swords are more about intellect, and intellect causing struggles, and could be between one or more people. We have the page. Remember, the pages represents the beginnings or the seeds of things, the beginning of some sort of idea, that rather than the wands where action needs to be taken, the idea is just being thought over, mulled over. So when you see the page, it could mean some new ideas are on the horizon, maybe in the back of their head. Could represent a young person who's very precocious, very talkative, and they usually they can be somewhat manipulative and talk their way out of, difficult situations. The page also can represent messages coming of an upsetting nature, or that a problem has either been solved, but maybe it has ended with much difficulty, so that this card says to me there's more to come, there's more to be done. Okay, so that's the page. The Knight of Swords, to me, knights always represent action. So in this case, something of a fleeting nature, and it could be unpleasant, is coming and going. It's very, very quick. Whenever I see the Knight, I will say, yes, I see a situation on the horizon that may cause a few wrinkles in your life, but it's going to come and go very quickly before you even know it. This Knight is too smart for their own good. They could be the smooth talker. They could be the con artist. They could represent someone showing up at your door asking for a contribution, but there is no real organization behind them. If it represents a person, then he can most definitely argue just for the sake of arguing. And there are some people like that. This is a sharp mind and a sharp tongue, so they can kind of cut you to ribbon, with their words. And this person, although you should never fear anyone, be very cautious around a person like this, because it's what they say to others that can hurt us. So that just treat them very carefully, keep them at arm's length. And on the upshot of this, for the Knight of Swords, could represent someone going into battle, someone who is very, 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 what I want to say, caught up in a cause and will fight for freedom. They'll also fight for freedom of information and speech. This could represent, too, a daredevil, or someone who likes to jump off of cliffs with a parachute, or, do things that put their lives in danger. So, again, when the Knight of Swords comes up, get the feeling of the card, what's around the card. Now, with the court cards, the coloring, even though I usually do not stress coloring in the court cards, usually the swords represent dark-haired, and they could be light or dark eyes in their coloring. But I usually go by the astrological signs, and the signs of air are Libra, Aquarius, and Gemini. We come to the Queen of Swords, and once again we have someone with a sharp mind and a sharp tongue. This could represent a single, a divorced woman, or she may be widowed. So very often I will look at this card and I'll get the idea that my client is single somehow. Now, she's a woman who really likes to have fun but has a hard time doing it. She might keep people at arm's length. She could very much, once again, use her tongue, use words to hurt others, but not always. She's very smart. The king and queen usually represent people who are very analytical, like scientists, computer brains, the legal system. Oftentimes the swords represent to me someone in the legal system. They could be a lawyer, they could be a judge, they could be on a police force or in law enforcement. But with the queen, she'll absorb the information and then she'll be able to relate it back succinctly, okay? So she gathers information and then she might give you a determination. So she could be someone that you might go to advice for, but I'm speaking more of advice on, for example, contracts, or even a real estate agent who has the knowledge and the know-how to help. So often the Queen of Swords, aloof, very cool, puts people off, but really sometimes she can have a very warm heart inside, and it's just not apparent right away on the surface. She's not like the Queen of Wands, who's very magnetic and could be the life of the party. Okay, so that's the Queen. And finally, the King of Swords, once again, someone who's logical, methodical, could be a lawyer, again, could be a judge, law enforcement, in government somehow, someone who passes judgment, a very fair person, unless you get a bad feeling from the card. This is someone who is not rattled very easily. They might be accused of not having any warm emotions. They might be accused of being cold or a cold fish. But they are definitely someone that you can trust. Or they could be an accountant that you go to for your taxes. Very smart with mathematics and the sciences, once again. Could represent even a professor of some sort. This man does like to debate and is very, very good with words. He may always seem to win an argument because he always has an answer to everything that is said, you know, so it's kind of difficult to go head to head with a person like this. This is where the Five of Swords comes into play. Sometimes it's easier just to let go and walk away because no one wins with the King of Swords. And I'm trying to see what else. This could be a single man. He could be someone who is away a lot from the family, travels a lot, is not really emotionally available, not really a family first type man. But when he is on track and upright, meaning, you know, he's pure King of Swords and he's fighting for, you know, the rights of others or for the freedom of others. He's a very, very strong individual. The only thing is he's very, very, could be stubborn and will not budge when it comes to a situation. So like we say in astrology, there are the 3 fixed signs, and Aquarius is one of them. You know, one of the signs where someone just has a real hard time seeing the other's point of view, and they're rather tunnel visioned, and they stick to their guns no matter what, even if it's detrimental to them. So there you have the swords. They're not all that bad, but it really depends on the cards surrounding them to fully describe the story or the situation going on. And you can see just by looking at them, they can be somewhat upsetting. But really, when you want to get to the heart of the matter and find out what someone is truly thinking, the swords are your answer. They're going to tell you what that person is truly thinking, or what they're going through, or their troubles at night when they can't sleep, or if they've been through a very, very serious illness, surgery, whether they've had to possibly leave their residence and move because of a job, and it's really upset them and their whole surroundings. So there is a lot of information in the swords. They're not to be afraid of. They're not to be something to be afraid of, because the cards, remember, they're just a tool. They don't dictate, they only suggest. So that's the end of the swords.